Thunder cracked overhead as Beatrice Conway clutched her swollen belly, her soaked dress clinging to her trembling form while she stumbled along the muddy trail toward the distant lights of Broken Springs, Colorado. The year was 1873, and she was utterly alone in the world except for the child growing within her, a child whose father had abandoned them both when the pregnancy became known. Rain pelted her face, mixing with tears of exhaustion and desperation as she fought to place one foot in front of the other. 6 months pregnant, traveling westward by stagecoach from Philadelphia in search of a teaching position in Denver, Beatrice had never imagined she would find herself stranded in the wilderness after the coach had lost a wheel miles back. The other passengers had continued with the driver on horseback toward the nearest station, promising to send help. But Beatrice, too pregnant to ride comfortably, had insisted on walking the supposedly short distance to town. Now, as darkness fell and the storm intensified, that decision seemed a grave mistake. Her legs buckled beneath her and she gripped a pine tree for support, gasping for breath. "Just a little further," she whispered to her unborn child. "We can make it." Lightning illuminated the trail ahead, revealing a small cabin set back from the path, a faint light glowing from its window. Hope surged through her veins. Shelter, warmth, perhaps salvation. Gathering her last reserves of strength, Beatrice made her way toward the cabin, praying whoever dwelled within possessed a kind heart. Her knuckles rapped weakly against the wooden door, once, twice, before her strength gave out completely. The door swung open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the warm light inside. "Good Lord," a deep voice exclaimed. "What in tarnation? Please," Beatrice managed, her vision blurring. "Help us." Strong arms caught her as consciousness slipped away, the stranger's voice becoming distant as darkness claimed her. "Easy now, madam. I've got you." When Beatrice awoke, she found herself lying on a narrow but comfortable bed, covered with a patchwork quilt. The cabin was small but tidy, with a fire crackling in the hearth. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced her back down. "I'd stay put if I were you," came that same deep voice from before. Beatrice turned her head to see a man rising from a chair near the fire. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a simple flannel shirt and worn denim trousers. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with serious blue eyes beneath a strong brow. Dark blonde hair fell to his shoulders, and a neatly trimmed beard covered his jaw. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse. The man approached, offering a cup of water. "My cabin about 3 miles outside of Broken Springs. Name's Wade Keller. Found you about to collapse on my doorstep during the worst storm we've had all spring." Beatrice took the water gratefully, drinking deeply before answering. "Beatrice Conway, I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Keller. Just Wade, madam. No need for formalities out here." His eyes flickered briefly to her swollen belly. "How's the little one?" As if in answer, the baby kicked. Beatrice placed a hand on her stomach. "Active. Thank goodness." Wade nodded, seeming relieved. "Good. I'm no doctor, but you were burning with fever when I brought you in. Been about a day and a half since then." "A day and a half?" Beatrice's eyes widened in alarm. "I've been unconscious that long. You woke a few times, though I doubt you remember. Got some broth into you. The fever broke this morning." He stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. "I hope you don't think it improper, but I had to get you out of those wet clothes. There's a widow lady from town, Mrs. Abernathy, who comes by to help with my wash sometimes. She took care of changing you." A blush crept up Beatrice's cheeks. "I understand. Thank you for your discretion." Wade cleared his throat. "You hungry? Got some stew on." Her stomach growled in response, and despite her embarrassment, Beatrice smiled. "It appears I am." While Wade ladled stew into a bowl, Beatrice took stock of her surroundings. The cabin was simply furnished but had a certain warmth to it, a home rather than merely a shelter. Bookshelves lined one wall, surprising her with their variety of volumes. A guitar rested in the corner. Through the window she could see the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear blue sky. "You live here alone?" she asked as he brought her the stew and helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back. Wade nodded. "Just me and the horses. Got a small ranch here, nothing fancy, but it's mine." "It's lovely," Beatrice said sincerely, taking a spoonful of stew. The rich flavors of beef, vegetables, and herbs filled her mouth. "This is delicious." A hint of a smile touched Wade's lips. "Thanks. Man learns to cook or starves out here." As she ate, Beatrice explained her situation, the teaching position awaiting her in Denver, the stagecoach breakdown, her decision to walk ahead. Wade's expression darkened. "They left a pregnant woman to walk miles in a storm. What kind of men do that?" "I insisted," Beatrice admitted. "They were reluctant, but I can be rather stubborn." "Still," Wade shook his head. "Not right." When she finished eating, Wade took her bowl. "You should rest more. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, I can take you into town. Telegraph office there can send word to Denver about your delay." Beatrice nodded gratefully, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger. "Mr. Keller, Wade, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." He waved away her words. "No need. Anybody would have done the same." But as Beatrice drifted back to sleep, she wasn't so certain that was true. The next morning, Beatrice awoke feeling considerably stronger. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, and the smell of coffee and something sweet filled the air. Wade was nowhere to be seen, but a dress was laid across the foot of the bed, simple, made of blue cotton, clearly well worn but clean. Carefully, she rose and dressed, grateful that the garment was loose enough to accommodate her pregnancy. She ran her fingers through her tangled auburn hair, wishing for a brush. The cabin door opened and Wade entered carrying an armful of firewood. He stopped short upon seeing her up. "Morning. Feeling better, much?" Beatrice smiled. "Is this Mrs. Abernathy's dress?" Wade nodded, setting down the wood. "She left it for you. Said you looked about her size before her husband passed, and she went to grief eating, as she put it." He gestured toward a small table where a brush and hand mirror lay. "She left those too." Gratitude washed over Beatrice. "How thoughtful." "Folks around here look out for each other," Wade said simply. "Coffee's hot, and there's johnny cake if you're hungry." Over breakfast, Beatrice learned more about her rescuer. Wade had come to Colorado 5 years earlier after the war. He'd fought for the Union, been wounded at Gettysburg, and afterward couldn't stomach returning to his family's crowded Pennsylvania town. With his army pay and some savings, he'd purchased this small plot of land and built the cabin himself. "I train horses now," he explained. "Broke Mustangs mostly, sell some, keep the best for breeding." "And you enjoy it, this solitary life?" Beatrice couldn't help asking. A shadow crossed Wade's face. "It suits me." There was a story there, Beatrice sensed, but it wasn't her place to pry. Instead, she told him about Philadelphia, her teaching career, and her decision to head west for better opportunities. She carefully avoided mentioning her child's father or the scandal that had driven her away. After breakfast, Wade hitched a wagon while Beatrice bundled up in a coat he lent her, far too large but warm. The drive to Broken Springs took about half an hour, following a winding trail through pine-covered hills. The town itself was small but busy, with a main street featuring the usual establishments: general store, saloon, hotel, blacksmith, and a small church. Wade helped Beatrice down from the wagon in front of the telegraph office. "I've got some supplies to pick up. Meet you back here in an hour." Beatrice nodded, suddenly apprehensive about being alone among strangers. As if sensing her discomfort, Wade added gently, "Mrs. Abernathy works at the general store if you need anything. Just tell her I sent you." Inside the telegraph office, Beatrice sent word to the school board in Denver, explaining her delay and assuring them she would arrive within the week. The operator, a thin man with spectacles, eyed her pregnant state with barely disguised disapproval but said nothing. Next, she visited the general store where a plump, gray-haired woman greeted her warmly. "Well now, you must be Wade's house guest. I'm Martha Abernathy. How's that dress fitting you, dear?" "Perfectly, Mrs. Abernathy. Thank you for your kindness." Martha waved away her thanks. "Nonsense. That dress was just gathering dust. Now, what can I help you with?" Beatrice purchased a few necessities, a comb, soap, and some undergarments with the small amount of money she had in her reticule. As Martha wrapped her purchases, the older woman chatted amiably about the town and its inhabitants. "Wade Keller's a good man," she said unexpectedly. "Keeps to himself mostly, but always ready to help when needed. Lost his wife and baby during the war, you know. He was fighting at the time, couldn't get home to them when the fever took them." Beatrice's heart constricted. How terrible. Martha nodded solemnly. "Some say that's why he came west. Too many memories back east." She handed over the package. "That'll be 75 cents, dear." As Beatrice counted out the money, Martha continued, "Town's been trying to get him properly socialized again for years. Jameson's daughter had her cap set for him for a while, but he wasn't interested." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Between us, I think he's just waiting for the right woman, one who understands loss." Uncomfortable with this turn in the conversation, Beatrice thanked Martha and left the store. Outside, she collided with a well-dressed man hurrying along the boardwalk. "Pardon me," he said, steadying her with a hand on her arm. He was middle-aged with a neat mustache and expensive clothing. His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance. "You're new in town." "Just passing through," Beatrice replied, trying to move past him. The man blocked her path. "Henry Blackburn at your service. I own the Broken Springs Bank and Mining Company." He glanced pointedly at her pregnancy. "Traveling alone, are you?" Before Beatrice could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. "She's with me, Blackburn." Wade stood a few feet away, his expression hard. Blackburn's demeanor changed instantly, becoming overly cordial. "Keller, rare to see you in town. Business or pleasure?" "Business," Wade said curtly, moving to Beatrice's side. "If you'll excuse us." Blackburn tipped his hat, but his eyes remained cold. "Of course. Pleasure meeting you, Miss Conway," Beatrice supplied reluctantly. "Miss Conway." Blackburn smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome to Broken Springs." As they walked away, Beatrice felt the man's gaze following them. "He seems intense," Wade grunted. "Henry Blackburn owns half the county and wants the rest. Stay clear of him if you can." They collected the supplies Wade had purchased: feed for his horses, flour, coffee, and other staples. As they loaded the wagon, Beatrice noticed a small girl staring at them from across the street. The child, about 7 years old, had blonde braids and a patched dress. When she caught Beatrice looking, she darted away. "Who was that?" Beatrice asked. Wade glanced up. "Likely one of the McDaniel kids. They live on the edge of town. Father died in a mining accident last year." The journey back to the cabin was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Wade helped Beatrice down, his strong hands gentle on her waist. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, a moment of understanding, perhaps, or recognition of shared loneliness. "Thank you," Beatrice said softly. Wade nodded, looking away. "Better get these supplies inside. Storm's brewing again." Sure enough, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. As they worked together to unload the wagon and stable the horses, Beatrice found herself watching Wade, the confident way he moved, the gentleness with which he handled the animals, the quiet competence in everything he did. By evening, rain was falling steadily. They sat before the fire, Wade whittling a small wooden horse while Beatrice mended a tear in one of his shirts she'd offered to repair. "The stagecoach line has a depot in Pine Creek," Wade said suddenly. "It's about 20 miles from here. Next coach to Denver comes through in 3 days." Beatrice's hand stilled. "I see. I can take you there once this weather clears," he continued, eyes fixed on his carving. "Get you back on your way to Denver." "Yes, of course," Beatrice agreed, though she felt an unexpected reluctance. "I shouldn't impose on your hospitality any longer than necessary." Wade looked up then, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "It's no imposition." Those simple words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. That night, as Beatrice lay in Wade's bed, he insisted on sleeping on a pallet by the fire. She listened to the rain drumming on the roof and wondered about the path her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been engaged to Edward Harrington, a fellow teacher at the girls' academy where she taught in Philadelphia. When she discovered her pregnancy, Edward had promptly broken their engagement, concerned more with his reputation than responsibility. The school board, upon learning of her condition, had asked for her resignation. Alone and disgraced, Beatrice had answered an advertisement for teachers in Denver, where she hoped to start anew. Her plan was to claim widowhood a common enough circumstance that few would question it, especially in the West, where life was harder and shorter. Now, in this small cabin with a man who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than Edward had in 2 years, Beatrice wondered if she was making another mistake in rushing toward Denver. The baby kicked, as if sharing her uncertainty. "What do we do, little one?" she whispered, rubbing her belly. "What do we do?" Morning brought clearing skies and an unexpected visitor. Beatrice was helping Wade prepare breakfast when they heard a wagon approaching. Wade frowned, reaching for the rifle he kept by the door. "Stay inside," he instructed, stepping onto the porch. Beatrice moved to the window, watching as a wagon pulled up, driven by a woman in her 30s with a weathered face and determined expression. Several children sat in the back, including the blonde girl Beatrice had seen in town. "Morning, Wade," the woman called. "Brought your milk and eggs." Wade's posture relaxed. He propped the rifle against the wall and stepped forward. "Morning, Sarah. Wasn't expecting you until next week." "Well, the chickens don't know what day it is," Sarah replied with a smile. She nodded toward the cabin. "Martha Abernathy says you've got company." Wade sighed. "News travels fast." "It's Broken Springs," Sarah laughed. "I knew what you ate for dinner last night before you did." Her eyes caught Beatrice watching from the window. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" With resigned amusement, Wade waved Beatrice out. She stepped onto the porch, suddenly self-conscious in her borrowed dress and with her hair hastily pinned up. "Beatrice Conway, this is Sarah McDaniel. She runs the farm next to Pine Creek. I buy milk and eggs from her." Sarah's handshake was firm. "Pleasure, Miss Conway." "These are my brood Joseph, Mary, Emma, and Thomas." The children nodded shyly from the wagon, except for the blonde girl Emma, who stared openly at Beatrice's belly. "Mama, is her baby going to come out soon?" Emma asked loudly. "Emma," Sarah scolded, but Beatrice laughed. "Not for a few more months," she told the girl, "but he or she is already quite active." Emma's eyes widened with interest. "Can I feel it kick?" "Emma McDaniel, mind your manners," Sarah admonished, but Beatrice was already moving toward the wagon. "It's all right," she assured Sarah. "I don't mind." She took Emma's small hand and placed it on her belly. After a moment, the baby obliged with a solid kick, making Emma squeal with delight. I felt it. Joseph, come feel. Soon all the McDaniel children were gathered around Beatrice, taking turns feeling the baby move. Sarah watched with a wistful smile. They miss having a baby around. Their pa died before Thomas was born. I'm so sorry, Beatrice said softly. Sarah shrugged. Life's hard out here, but we get by. She turned to Wade. I'd better get these hooligans back, got churning to do. She lowered her voice. Word is Henry Blackburn's been asking about your visitor. Might want to watch out. Wade's expression darkened. Thanks for the warning. After the McDaniels departed, Wade and Beatrice finished preparing breakfast in thoughtful silence. As they ate, Wade finally spoke. Weather's clearing. Could head to Pine Creek tomorrow if you're feeling up to it. Beatrice nodded, though the prospect brought a strange sadness. Yes, I should continue to Denver. They're expecting me. Wade pushed his plate away, his face unreadable. Beatrice, I don't mean to pry, but... He hesitated, then continued. The father of your child, is he in Denver? The question caught her off guard. No, she answered honestly. He's in Philadelphia. He doesn't wish to be involved. Wade's jaw tightened. I see. I told the school board in Denver that I'm a widow, Beatrice confessed, not meeting his eyes. It seemed easier than the truth. The truth being, Beatrice sighed, that I trusted a man who promised marriage, then abandoned me when I needed him most. Wade was silent for a long moment. Man sounds like a coward. He is, Beatrice agreed, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. But his cowardice taught me something important. I can rely on myself. This baby and I will manage on our own. Wade's blue eyes studied her face. I believe you will. He stood abruptly. Got some work to do with the horses. Make yourself at home. Beatrice watched him leave, wondering if she had somehow offended him with her declaration of independence. Throughout the day, he remained distant, working with his horses while she occupied herself around the cabin, washing dishes and sweeping floors in a small attempt to repay his kindness. By evening, dark clouds were gathering again, this time bringing a biting wind that rattled the cabin windows. Wade came in from the stables, his expression troubled. Storm's coming in fast from the north, he announced. Going to be a bad one, no traveling tomorrow. Relief mingled with concern in Beatrice's heart. Will we be all right here? Wade nodded. Cabin sturdy. Got plenty of firewood and supplies. He hung his coat by the door. But I'm worried about Sarah and the kids. Their place isn't as solid. As if summoned by his concern, a frantic knocking sounded at the door. Wade opened it to find Sarah McDaniel, soaked and breathless, with her youngest child in her arms. Wade, thank God, she gasped. The creek's rising. Water's coming into the house. The other children are trying to save what they can, but we need help. Without hesitation, Wade grabbed his coat. I'll hitch the wagon. We'll bring everyone back here. I'm coming too, Beatrice said firmly, already reaching for her borrowed coat. Wade started to protest, then nodded. Stay in the wagon. The trip to the McDaniel farm was harrowing. Rain lashed at them, and twice the wagon wheels nearly stuck in the increasingly muddy road. When they arrived, the situation was dire. Water was already ankle-deep in the small farmhouse, and the 3 older McDaniel children were desperately trying to move furniture to higher ground. Wade waded in, lifting Thomas onto his shoulders while directing Joseph to gather essential supplies. Take only what you need for a few days. The rest can wait. Beatrice, despite Wade's instructions, couldn't remain in the wagon. She helped Emma and Mary collect clothes and blankets, stuffing them into sacks. The rising water made movement difficult, and by the time they had gathered the necessities, it had reached Beatrice's knees. That's enough, Wade called over the storm's roar. We need to go. Now. They loaded the wagon with the salvaged items and the 4 children. Sarah climbed up last, her face etched with worry. "The animals, I'll come back for them after you're safe," Wade promised, urging the horses forward. The return journey was even more treacherous. Twice the wagon wheels slid on the muddy track, nearly sending them into the ditch. The children huddled together under a tarp, while Sarah held the reins, allowing Wade to walk alongside, guiding the horses through the worst spots. Beatrice sat with the children, trying to keep their spirits up with stories and songs, all while fighting her own fear. When Emma began to cry, Beatrice pulled the child into her lap, stroking her wet hair. "It's going to be all right," she soothed. "Mr. Keller won't let anything happen to us." "Promise?" Emma's tear-stained face looked up at her. "I promise," Beatrice said with more confidence than she felt. They were halfway back to the cabin when disaster struck. A flash flood surged across the road ahead, cutting off their path. The horses reared in panic, nearly overturning the wagon. "Hold tight," Wade shouted, grabbing the bridles. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the wagon would be swept away. Then Wade managed to turn the team, directing them up a small rise away from the flooded road. "We'll have to take the high trail," he called to Sarah. "It's longer but safer." The high trail proved to be little more than a deer path winding through the pines, but it kept them above the rising water. By the time the cabin came into view, all of them were exhausted, soaked, and shivering. Inside, Wade quickly built up the fire while Beatrice helped Sarah get the children into dry clothes, mostly Wade's shirts, which hung like dresses on the smaller ones. Hot tea was prepared, blankets distributed, and slowly the color returned to everyone's cheeks. "Thank you," Sarah said softly to Beatrice, as they sat watching the children finally drift off to sleep on pallets before the fire. "You risked yourself for my family." "Anyone would have done the same," Beatrice echoed Wade's earlier words. Sarah smiled knowingly. "Not anyone. Not in your condition." She glanced toward the door where Wade was bringing in more firewood. "He's a good man, you know, the best I've known since my William passed." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm. "We've only just met." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Sarah replied. "Sometimes you just know." Later, after Sarah had fallen asleep alongside her children, Beatrice found Wade sitting at the small table, studying a map by lamplight. "What are you looking at?" she asked quietly. "Trying to figure out which bridges might still be passable." "Need to get back to Sarah's place for the livestock as soon as it's light." Beatrice sat across from him. "I want to thank you. What you did tonight." Wade shook his head. "Don't need thanks for doing what's right. Nevertheless, you have mine." She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about taking me to Pine Creek." He looked up, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I've decided I should send another telegraph to Denver," Beatrice continued. "Tell them I'll be further delayed. With the floods, the roads won't be passable for days anyway." Was that relief she saw in his eyes? "Sensible decision," he said. And she took a deep breath. "I thought perhaps I might repay your kindness by helping with the McDaniel children while Sarah salvages what she can from her farm." Now there was definitely a smile tugging at the corners of Wade's mouth. "They seem to have taken to you." "They're wonderful children," Beatrice said sincerely. "And I am a teacher after all. I could give them lessons while they are here." Wade nodded slowly. "Sarah would appreciate that. She worries they're falling behind, being so far from the town school." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Wade spoke again. "What will you do in Denver? Once the baby comes, I mean." It was a question Beatrice had asked herself countless times. "The school provides housing for teachers. I'll hire someone to watch the baby while I teach. It won't be easy, but we'll manage." "Alone," Wade said, making it half a question. "Yes," Beatrice confirmed. "Alone." Wade's eyes held hers for a long moment. "It takes courage what you're doing." The simple acknowledgment nearly undid her. How long had it been since anyone had seen strength rather than shame in her situation? Tears threatened, and she blinked them back. "Thank you for understanding," she whispered. Wade reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be busy." Busy proved an understatement. The storm continued through the night, and by morning the creek had become a raging torrent. Wade ventured out at first light to check on Sarah's livestock, returning hours later with news that while the barn remained mostly dry, the farmhouse was largely flooded. "Animals are safe for now," he reported. "Got them to higher ground and left enough feed. House will need extensive repairs once the water recedes." Sarah took the news stoically. "At least we're all safe. That's what matters." Over the next several days, the cabin settled into a new rhythm. Wade continued tending to both his horses and Sarah's animals, often returning soaked and exhausted. Sarah took over cooking duties, grateful for the opportunity to contribute. Beatrice established a makeshift school for the children, using Wade's books and improvised teaching materials. To everyone's surprise, Wade sat in on these lessons when he could, listening intently as Beatrice taught reading, arithmetic, and history. Once, when she paused during a geography lesson, uncertain about the capital of Montana Territory, Wade quietly supplied, "Virginia City," then looked embarrassed when everyone turned to stare at him. "Seems I've got an assistant teacher," Beatrice teased. Wade shrugged. "Read it somewhere." But Beatrice had seen his bookshelf, noted the worn spines and dog-eared pages. Wade Keller was no uneducated rancher, but a man who valued knowledge and simply kept it to himself. As the days passed, Beatrice found herself watching Wade with increasing interest, the way his hands, rough from work, could gently bandage Emma's skinned knee. How he listened patiently to Joseph's endless questions about horses, the rare but transformative smile that lit his entire face when something genuinely amused him. She also caught him watching her, especially when she read stories to the children in the evenings. His blue eyes would soften, and something like longing would cross his features before he carefully masked it again. By the fifth day, the rain finally stopped, and the floodwaters began to recede. The roads, however, remained impassable, the bridges washed out. "Sheriff rode by," Wade announced one evening. "Says it'll be at least another week before the stage runs to Pine Creek again." Sarah, who was mending clothes by the fire, looked up. "That's a shame for you, Beatrice." "Denver will have to wait a bit longer." "Yes," Beatrice agreed, though her heart wasn't in it. The truth was, she had begun to dread the day she would have to leave. This cabin, despite its cramped conditions with 7 people living in it, had started to feel like home in a way no place had since her parents died years ago. Later that night, after the others had gone to sleep, Beatrice stepped onto the porch for a breath of fresh air. The sky had cleared, revealing a tapestry of stars so bright and numerous they took her breath away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Wade's voice came from the shadows. He was sitting on the porch steps, a cup of coffee in his hands. Beatrice startled slightly. "I didn't see you there." "Sorry," he apologized, moving over to make room for her on the step. "Couldn't sleep." She sat beside him, careful to leave proper space between them. "Neither could I. The baby is particularly active tonight," Wade smiled. "Getting stronger." "Yes." Beatrice placed a hand on her belly. "Sometimes I worry, though, about doing this alone." Wade was silent for a moment. "My wife, Rebecca, used to worry too before." He trailed off. "Mrs. Abernathy told me," Beatrice said gently. "I'm so sorry, Wade," he nodded, his profile stoic against the starlight. "Was coming home to her when it happened. Had been wounded at Gettysburg, got a medical discharge. Telegram reached me in Cincinnati. By the time I got to Pennsylvania, they were both already buried. Rebecca and our daughter, Lily. Beatrice's heart ached for him. How old was Lily? 4 months, Wade replied, his voice barely audible. Never even got to hold her. Instinctively, Beatrice reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. Wade's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. That's why you came west, she said. To escape the memories. Wade nodded. Thought distance would help. It didn't, not really, just learn to live with it. They sat in silence for a long moment, their joined hands a bridge across their separate sorrows. What was Rebecca like? Beatrice finally asked. A ghost of a smile touched Wade's lips. Stubborn, smart. Could outride most men, had the most beautiful singing voice. He looked sideways at Beatrice. Bit like you, actually. Independent, strong. The comparison warmed her. She sounds wonderful, she was. Wade's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. Your baby's father, the one who abandoned you. Does he know what he gave up? Beatrice shook her head. Edward wanted a proper wife who would advance his career, not a scandal. When I told him about the baby, he said I'd trapped him. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. I realized then that I'd never really known him at all. His loss, Wade said simply. Their eyes met in the darkness, and Beatrice felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of shared pain, but also of possibility. The moment was interrupted by Emma's sleepy voice from the doorway. Miss Beatrice, I had a bad dream. Wade released her hand as Beatrice rose to comfort the child. I'll be right there, Emma. Before she went inside, Beatrice turned back to Wade. Thank you. He nodded, understanding she meant for more than just the conversation. The next day brought a new challenge. Henry Blackburn arrived at the cabin, accompanied by the town sheriff, a nervous-looking man named Parker. Keller, Blackburn called from his horse. Need to talk to you. Wade stepped onto the porch, his stance defensive. What about? Sheriff Parker cleared his throat. Got reports the McDaniel place is flooded out. Came to check on the family. They're fine, Wade replied shortly. Staying here until their place dries out. Blackburn dismounted, his eyes scanning the property. Mighty generous of you. Mind if we come in? Weather's turning cold. Before Wade could answer, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Sheriff Parker, Mr. Blackburn. What brings you out this way? Blackburn smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Concerned about your welfare, Mrs. McDaniel, and that of your children. We're managing just fine, Sarah replied coolly. Nevertheless, Blackburn continued, the town council has discussed your situation. We've arranged temporary lodging for you and your children at the Widow Jenkins boarding house. Sarah frowned. That's kind, but unnecessary. Wade has generously opened his home to us. Yes, well, Blackburn's gaze slid to Beatrice, who had joined them on the porch. That's another matter we need to discuss. There have been concerns about propriety. An unmarried woman staying with a bachelor. I'm a widow, Beatrice interjected firmly. Of course, Blackburn's tone suggested he didn't believe her. Still, appearances matter in our little community. Wade stepped forward, his expression darkening. What are you implying, Blackburn? The sheriff raised his hands placatingly. Now, nobody's implying anything. Just concerned about the lady's reputation. And yours, Keller. My reputation is none of your concern, Wade growled. Blackburn's smile turned cold. Perhaps not, but I do hold the note on Sarah's farm. As collateral, I might need to take possession of her livestock for safekeeping, you understand, until she can demonstrate adequate means to care for them again. Sarah paled. You can't do that. Those animals are all we have. I'm afraid the bank regulations are quite clear, Blackburn replied smoothly, Wade's hands clenched into fists. This isn't about regulations. You've been trying to get Sarah's land for years. Business is business, Blackburn shrugged. But I'm a reasonable man. Come into town, all of you. Stay where it's proper. Let me handle the livestock until the farm is repaired. Everything can be sorted out civilly. The trap was obvious. Once Sarah and her children were in town, once Blackburn had her animals, she would never recover her independence. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We're staying here." Blackburn's face hardened. "I was hoping you'd be reasonable. Sheriff, I believe you have some papers to serve." Sheriff Parker reluctantly produced an official-looking document. "Sarah McDaniel, this is a notice of pending foreclosure on your property, effective immediately." Beatrice watched Sarah's face crumple. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Mr. Blackburn, how much is owed on Mrs. McDaniel's note?" Blackburn raised an eyebrow. $217, madam. Why do you ask?" Beatrice turned to Wade. "Do you have paper and pen I might borrow?" Confused but trusting, Wade went inside and returned with the requested items. Beatrice quickly wrote out a draft on her Philadelphia bank. "This is a banker's draft for $250. It will more than cover Mrs. McDaniel's debt." Blackburn stared at the paper suspiciously. "And you just happen to have such funds available?" "I do," Beatrice confirmed. Her teaching position didn't pay well, but she had inherited a modest sum from her parents, carefully saved for emergencies. This, she decided, qualified. "The draft is valid. You can confirm with the Philadelphia Mercantile Bank." Blackburn reluctantly took the paper. "This will take weeks to clear." "Then hold the foreclosure until it does," Beatrice suggested smoothly. "Unless you're more interested in acquiring Sarah's land than in recovering the bank's money." The banker's eyes narrowed, but with the sheriff watching, he had little choice. "Very well. Foreclosure suspended until this draft clears." He pocketed the paper and remounted his horse. "But this isn't over, Keller. Not by a long shot." After they departed, Sarah turned to Beatrice in shock. "I can't let you do this. That's your money, your security." "I can spare it," Beatrice insisted. "Consider it an investment in your children's education." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "How will I ever repay you?" Wade, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of admiration and concern, spoke up. "We'll figure something out. Important thing is, your place is safe now." Later, when the children were occupied with their lessons and Sarah was resting, Wade confronted Beatrice in the kitchen area. "That was your savings, wasn't it, for the baby?" Beatrice nodded, not meeting his eyes as she kneaded bread dough. "I'll manage." Wade leaned against the counter, studying her face. "Why did you do it?" Her hands stilled. "Because it was right. Because Sarah and those children deserve their home. Because men like Blackburn shouldn't always win." A slow smile spread across Wade's face. "You are something else, Beatrice Conway." She looked up then, flour dusting her cheeks. "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" "Definitely a compliment," he assured her. And then, to her surprise, he reached out and gently wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek. His touch lingered, warm against her skin, and for a breathless moment, Beatrice thought he might lean in closer. Instead, he pulled back, clearing his throat. "I should check on the horses." As he walked away, Beatrice pressed her hand to her cheek where his fingers had been, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with bread making. The next week passed in a blur of activity. The floodwaters receded enough for Wade and Joseph to begin repairs on the McDaniel farmhouse. Beatrice continued teaching the children, and in the evenings, the cabin was filled with stories, music. Wade reluctantly brought out his guitar after much pleading from Emma, and more laughter than any of them had experienced in months. Each night, Beatrice found herself on the porch with Wade, their conversations flowing more easily as they shared pieces of their lives. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, her love of teaching, her dreams for her child. He spoke of his family in Pennsylvania, his time in the Army, his journey west, and his plans for expanding his horse breeding operation. "I've been saving to buy the adjacent property," he confided one evening. "Build a proper stable, maybe a bigger house." "For the horses," Beatrice teased. Wade smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his face. "Cabin does seem smaller lately, doesn't it?" It was during one of these evening conversations that Wade broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "Sheriff says the stage to Denver will be running again by week's end," he said, watching her carefully. "Road crews have been working on the bridges." Beatrice felt her stomach tighten. "Oh, that's good news," Wade nodded, his eyes on the distant hills. "Is it?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. "Wade," Beatrice began hesitantly. She was interrupted by a sharp pain that made her gasp and clutch her belly. Wade was instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she assured him, breathing deeply as the pain subsided. "The baby just moved suddenly, caught me off guard." Wade didn't look convinced. "You're sure you're not? It's not coming early?" The concern in his voice touched her. "No, I still have about 3 months to go. Everything's fine." He relaxed slightly but remained watchful. "What were you going to say?" "Before," Beatrice gathered her courage, "I was going to ask, what if I didn't go to Denver, at least not right away?" Wade's expression remained carefully neutral. "You'd stay in Broken Springs. If there was a reason to," she replied softly. Their eyes met, and this time Wade didn't look away. "Beatrice, I'm not a man who speaks easily about feelings, but these past weeks—" He took a deep breath. "I find myself not wanting you to go." Joy bloomed in her chest. "I find myself not wanting to go." Wade shifted closer on the porch step, taking her hand in his. "I know it's fast. We barely know each other. And you're in a vulnerable position." "No," Beatrice interrupted. "Don't diminish this by suggesting I'm only interested because of my circumstances. What I feel for you has nothing to do with needing shelter or protection." Wade's expression softened. "What do you feel?" "Hope," she answered honestly. "For the first time in months, joy, connection." She squeezed his hand. "I don't know what to call it yet, but it's real, Wade." He nodded slowly. "For me too." His thumb traced her knuckles. "I haven't felt this way since Rebecca. Didn't think I ever would again." "What do we do about it?" Beatrice asked. Wade looked up at the stars, considering. "I think we take our time, get to know each other properly. No rush, no pressure." His eyes returned to hers. "I can find you lodging in town, proper and respectable. You could teach at the school there. They've been looking for someone with your qualifications." "And then," Beatrice prompted. A small smile touched his lips. "And then we see where this leads us." It wasn't a declaration of undying love or a marriage proposal, but to Beatrice it was perfect, honest, respectful, and full of possibility. "I'd like that," she said simply. Wade's smile widened. Then, with deliberate care, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. It was brief but filled with promise, and when he pulled back, Beatrice knew she had made the right decision. The following day they shared their plans with Sarah, who was unsurprised and thoroughly approving. "About time," she declared. "Been watching you two circle each other for weeks, like a pair of shy deer." Arrangements were quickly made. Mrs. Abernathy had a spare room she was willing to rent to Beatrice, and the town school board, upon learning of her credentials, eagerly offered her a position teaching the younger children. By the end of the week, the McDaniel farmhouse was habitable again, though still in need of further repairs. As Sarah and the children prepared to return home, Emma clung to Beatrice. "Will you still teach us?" the little girl asked anxiously. "Of course," Beatrice promised. "I'll be teaching at the town school, and you'll all attend as soon as the roads are fully passable." "And will you still marry Mr. Wade?" Emma asked innocently, causing the adults to exchange startled glances. "Emma," Sarah scolded. "That's not, it's all right. Wade interjected, kneeling to Emma's level. "Miss Beatrice and I are friends who care about each other very much. We're going to spend more time together and see what happens. Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this seriously. "I guess. But you should marry her before the baby comes. That's what my pa did with Thomas." The adults struggled not to laugh as Emma skipped away, satisfied with having shared her wisdom. "Out of the mouths of babes," Sarah murmured, following her daughter to the wagon. Once the McDaniels had departed, the cabin seemed strangely empty. Beatrice wandered through the rooms, realizing how quickly she had come to think of this place as home. "It'll be quiet again," Wade commented, watching her. "Too quiet," Beatrice agreed. "I'll miss them and this place." Wade moved closer, his expression thoughtful. "You know, you don't have to leave right away. The room at Mrs. Abernathy's won't be ready until next week." Beatrice smiled. "Are you suggesting I stay a little longer, just for practicality's sake?" he said, his eyes twinkling. "And maybe so we can have one evening without children interrupting our conversations." "Purely practical," Beatrice agreed, her heart lighter than it had been in months. That evening they sat before the fire, talking long into the night. Wade spoke of his hopes for his ranch and, tentatively, of his growing feelings for her. Beatrice shared her fears about motherhood and her determination to give her child a good life. "The baby will have that," Wade assured her. "You're going to be a wonderful mother." Beatrice smiled gratefully. "Thank you for believing in me. Not many would, given my situation." "Anyone who judges you for protecting your child isn't worth your time," Wade said firmly. "Including your Edward." "He's not my Edward," Beatrice corrected. "He never really was." Wade nodded, hesitated, then asked, "Do you think you might ever want to marry again? Someday, I mean." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implication. "Yes," Beatrice answered softly. "With the right person, I would." Wade held her gaze, and in his eyes, Beatrice saw a future unfolding, one very different from what she had planned, but infinitely more promising. The next morning, as Beatrice was packing her few belongings for the move to town, another pain gripped her sharper and longer than before. She gasped, clutching the edge of the table for support. Wade entered from outside, saw her distress, and was instantly at her side. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," Beatrice admitted as the pain subsided. "That's the third one this morning." Concern creased Wade's brow. "You said you still had 3 months." "I do," Beatrice insisted. "It must be false labor. The midwife in Philadelphia mentioned it can happen." But even as she spoke, another pain began building. This one brought her to her knees, and when it passed, she found the floor beneath her wet. "Wade," she whispered, fear constricting her throat. "I think my water just broke." The color drained from Wade's face. "The baby's coming now," Beatrice nodded, panic rising. "It's too early, too early." Wade took a deep breath, visibly steadying himself. Okay, we need help." He helped her to the bed. "I'll ride for the doctor in town." "There isn't time," Beatrice gasped as another contraction hit. "The baby's coming fast." Wade ran a hand through his hair, thinking rapidly. "Sarah, she's delivered babies before. She's closer." "Yes," Beatrice agreed, relief washing over her. "Sarah." Wade squeezed her hand. "Hold on, I'll be back as quick as I can." The next hours were a blur of pain and fear for Beatrice. Wade returned with Sarah, who took charge with calm efficiency. The labor was difficult, the baby was indeed early, but determined to make its entrance through it all. Wade remained by Beatrice's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, and murmuring encouragement. His steady presence anchored her through the worst of the pain. "You're doing great," he told her repeatedly. "So brave, just hold on." When Beatrice felt she couldn't endure another moment, Sarah announced, "I can see the head." "One more big push, Beatrice." Gathering her last reserves of strength, Beatrice pushed with everything she had. There was a moment of searing pain, then blessed relief, followed by the thin cry of a newborn. "It's a boy," Sarah announced, tears in her eyes. "A beautiful, perfect little boy." She placed the tiny infant on Beatrice's chest. He was small, so much smaller than Beatrice had expected, but his cry was strong, his tiny fists waving in protest at his abrupt entry into the world. "Hello, little one," Beatrice whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're early, but you're perfect." She looked up to find Wade watching them, his expression a mixture of awe and tenderness. Their eyes met over the baby's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, a promise. "He's amazing," Wade said softly. Beatrice smiled through her tears. "Would you like to hold him?" Hesitantly, as if afraid he might break something so precious, Wade took the baby in his large hands. The contrast was striking, this tiny new life cradled by the weathered hands of a man who had seen so much death. "Hello, young man," Wade said, his voice rough with emotion. "You've got a strong grip there." Indeed, the baby had wrapped his tiny fingers around one of Wade's. "What will you name him?" Wade asked. Beatrice had considered many names during her pregnancy, but now, looking at her son in Wade's arms, she knew. "William," she said, "after your middle name." Wade had mentioned it during one of their evening conversations. Wade looked up, surprised and deeply moved. "William," he repeated. "It suits him." Sarah, who had been quietly cleaning up, smiled knowingly. "I'll give you 3 some time alone. Need to check on my brood anyway. I'll be back this evening to see how he's doing." After she left, Wade carefully returned William to Beatrice's arms and sat on the edge of the bed. "He's so small, but strong," Beatrice assured him, though her own heart was heavy with worry for her premature son. As if sensing her fear, Wade reached out to stroke the baby's head. Just like his mother, Beatrice looked up at him, vulnerability in her eyes. "Wade, I understand if this changes things between us. A premature baby, especially out here." Wade's expression turned serious. "Beatrice Conway, do you think so little of me that I would walk away now?" "No," she admitted, "but I need to be certain. William comes first for me now, always." "As he should," Wade agreed. He took her free hand in his. "I meant what I said before. I want to see where this leads us." "That hasn't changed." Relief washed over her. "Thank you," Wade smiled. "Don't thank me for being a decent human being." His expression softened as he looked at William. "Besides, I think I'm already falling for both of you." The next 2 weeks were both joyous and challenging. William proved to be a fighter, nursing well despite his small size. Sarah and Mrs. Abernathy took turns helping Beatrice, showing her how to bathe the baby, how to swaddle him tightly for comfort, how to recognize his different cries. Wade transformed his cabin to accommodate their needs, constructing a cradle from pine wood, and moving his own belongings to the small storage room to give Beatrice and William the bedroom. News of the baby's early arrival spread through Broken Springs, and to Beatrice's surprise, the townspeople responded with generosity rather than judgment. Women arrived with baby clothes, soups, and casseroles. Even the stern-faced preacher's wife brought a hand-knitted blanket and offered her congratulations. "Seems you've been accepted," Wade commented one evening as they sat on the porch, William sleeping peacefully in Beatrice's arms. "I'm as surprised as you are," she admitted. "I expected more disapproval," Wade smiled. "People around here judge you more by your actions than your circumstances. You helped Sarah save her farm. You're teaching their children. And," he added with a touch of pride, "they respect you for surviving that storm." Beatrice laughed softly. "Hardly heroic on my part. I just happened to be in it." "Sometimes that's all heroism is," Wade said seriously, "enduring what life throws at you." By William's 3rd week, He had gained enough weight, that doctor. Peterson, who had been checking on him regularly, pronounced him thriving against all odds. The same day, Mrs. Abernathy informed Beatrice that her room in town was ready whenever she was. That evening, after William was fed and sleeping, Beatrice broached the subject with Wade. "Mrs. Abernathy says the room is ready. The school board is eager for me to start when I feel able." Wade nodded, his expression neutral. "How do you feel about it?" Beatrice sighed. "Truthfully, I'm not ready to leave this cabin, or you." She met his eyes directly. "But I know we agreed to take things slowly, to be proper about this, for my reputation and William's." Wade was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Finally, he stood and walked to his bookshelf, removing something from behind a row of books. When he returned, he held a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for days," he admitted, sitting beside her again. Trying to find the right moment, the right words. Beatrice's heart began to race as he opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," Wade explained. "Sent for it weeks ago after I knew I wanted you to stay." "Wade," Beatrice breathed, unable to say more. He took her hand, his own slightly trembling. "Beatrice, I know this is fast, too fast maybe, and I'm not a perfect man. I'm stubborn and set in my ways. Got a past that haunts me sometimes, but I love you. Love William too, though he's not mine by blood." "Wade," Beatrice tried again, but he gently pressed a finger to her lips. "Let me finish, or I might lose my nerve." He took a deep breath. "I don't want you to go to town. I want you to stay here with me. As my wife, if you'll have me, we can build something good together, I know it." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. "Are you sure? You'd be taking on another man's child." Wade's expression was tender but firm. "William would be my son in every way that matters. And any man fool enough to abandon him doesn't deserve to be called his father." Love swelled in Beatrice's heart, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Wade Keller." Joy transformed Wade's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, a kiss full of promise and commitment. When they finally parted, Beatrice laughed softly. "Emma will be pleased. She thought we should be married before the baby came." Wade chuckled. "Well, we're a little late on that score, but I don't think she'll mind." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Broken Springs. Sarah McDaniel stood as Beatrice's witness, while Joseph proudly held William during the ceremony. The entire town turned out for the occasion, filling the church and spilling onto the street outside. Even Henry Blackburn attended, though his congratulations seemed strained. The banker pulled Wade aside during the reception at the hotel dining room. "Quite a whirlwind romance, Keller," he commented dryly. Wade's expression remained pleasant. "When you know, you know." Blackburn sipped his punch. "Indeed. I've processed Mrs. Conway's pardon, Mrs. Keller's draft. All seems in order with Mrs. McDaniel's loan now." "Glad to hear it," Wade replied evenly. "Yes, well." Blackburn straightened his jacket. "I suppose this means you'll be expanding your operations. New wife, new baby. Going to need more than that little cabin of yours." Wade's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you getting at, Blackburn?" The banker smiled thinly. "Just that my offer for the Taylor property still stands if you're interested. Adjacent to yours, as I recall. Good grazing land." Wade stared at him in surprise. "You bought the Taylor place?" "When? Last month," Blackburn replied smoothly. "Unfortunate timing for you, I suppose, but I might be persuaded to sell for the right price." Understanding dawned on Wade's face. "This is about Sarah's farm, isn't it?" "You're still sore about that." Blackburn's smile vanished. "Business is business, Keller, nothing personal, remember that." He tipped his hat and moved away through the crowd. Wade watched him go, his jaw tight. When he rejoined Beatrice, she immediately noticed his tension. What did he want? she asked quietly, William sleeping peacefully in her arms. Wade shook his head. Nothing important, not today, he smiled, pushing the encounter from his mind. Today is about us, and it was. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than the small town usually saw outside of harvest festivals. When it was time to leave, Sarah took William for the night a wedding gift. She insisted with a wink, allowing the newlyweds privacy for their first night as husband and wife. Back at the cabin, their home now, truly Wade carried Beatrice across the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Keller," he said, setting her down gently. Beatrice smiled up at him, love overwhelming her. "I never thought I'd find this," she admitted. "When I learned I was expecting William, I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning in a way I couldn't imagine." Wade drew her into his arms. "Life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes for the worse, sometimes," he kissed her softly, "for the infinitely better." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Wade told her about Blackburn's offer of the neighboring property. "He bought it knowing I wanted it," he explained. "Now he'll make me pay dearly for it." Beatrice propped herself up on one elbow. "Do we need it? Is this cabin not enough?" Wade traced her cheek with his fingers. "It's enough for now, but I had plans, dreams of building something larger for the future," he smiled ruefully. "Seems Blackburn figured that out." "We'll find another way," Beatrice assured him, "or another property. The important thing is that we're together." Wade pulled her closer. "You're right. The rest is just details." The first year of their marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. William grew stronger each day, developing into a cheerful, curious baby with Wade's blue eyes and Beatrice's auburn hair, a coincidence that often led strangers to assume he was Wade's biological son. Wade never corrected them, and soon began to introduce William as "my son" without qualification. The day the baby first called him Da, Wade had to turn away to hide the tears in his eyes. Beatrice divided her time between teaching at the town school and helping Wade with the ranch. Under her encouragement, he expanded his horse breeding business, gaining a reputation throughout the territory for his well-trained stock. The issue of the neighboring property remained a thorn in their side. Blackburn demanded 3 times its value, a sum they couldn't afford without sacrificing their carefully built savings. Wade refused to give the banker the satisfaction, and they focused instead on improving what they had. Sarah McDaniel repaid Beatrice's loan in installments of milk, eggs, and help with William. The two women became close friends, and the McDaniel children were frequent visitors to the Keller ranch, especially once Wade built an extension to the cabin, adding 2 small bedrooms and enlarging the main living area. "Not quite the grand house I planned," he admitted as they moved their belongings into the new master bedroom. "But it's a start." Beatrice wrapped her arms around his waist. "It's perfect, big enough for all 3 of us and maybe one more someday." Wade raised an eyebrow. "One more?" Beatrice smiled mysteriously. "Maybe, when the time is right." As William's first birthday approached, Beatrice received a letter that upset their hard-won peace. It was from Philadelphia, specifically, from Edward Harrington. She sat on the porch steps, reading it with trembling hands. Edward had learned of her whereabouts through a mutual acquaintance. He expressed concern for his child and indicated he might travel west to assess the situation. "Bad news?" Wade asked, joining her on the steps after putting William down for his nap. Wordlessly, Beatrice handed him the letter. Wade read it, his expression darkening with each line. "He can't just show up now," he said finally, his voice tight with anger, "after abandoning you both." "Legally, he has rights," Beatrice said quietly. "He's William's father." Wade stood abruptly. No. He contributed to William's birth. That doesn't make him a father. He paced the porch. What does he want? Money, is that it? Beatrice shook her head. I don't know. Maybe seeing my name in the Philadelphia paper made him reconsider. She had been featured in an article about pioneering female educators in the West, sent in by the proud Broken Spring School Board. Well, he can reconsider all he wants, Wade declared. William is my son now. Our son. Beatrice rose and placed a calming hand on his arm. And he always will be, regardless of what Edward does. But we need to be prepared, just in case. They spent the next few weeks in anxious anticipation, but William's birthday came and went with no word from Edward. They celebrated with a small party at the ranch, attended by the McDaniels, the Abernathys, and a few other close friends from town. As summer turned to fall, they began to believe Edward had changed his mind. Then, on a crisp October morning, a well-dressed stranger arrived at their door. Beatrice was alone with William when the knock came. Wade had ridden out at dawn to help a neighboring rancher with a difficult foaling. She opened the door to find a man she barely recognized, Edward Harrington, but changed from the dapper teacher she had known in Philadelphia. He looked older, thinner, his once immaculate appearance somewhat diminished by travel. Beatrice, he said simply, you look well. She stood frozen in the doorway, William on her hip. The baby regarded the stranger curiously, then buried his face in his mother's shoulder. Edward, she finally managed. What are you doing here? He removed his hat, a gesture of politeness that seemed absurdly formal given their history. May I come in? It's been a long journey. Reluctantly, Beatrice stepped aside. Edward entered the cabin, his eyes taking in the modest but comfortable home she and Wade had created. So this is where you settled, he commented, setting his hat on the table. His gaze fell on William. And this is my son. This is William, Beatrice confirmed, instinctively holding the baby closer. My son. Edward stepped forward, reaching out as if to touch the child. William whimpered and turned away. He doesn't know me, Edward said, a note of accusation in his voice. You've never met him, Beatrice pointed out. Why are you here, Edward? After all this time, Edward sighed, lowering his hand. I made a mistake, Beatrice. When you told me about the baby, I panicked, thought only of my career, my reputation. He met her eyes. I've regretted it ever since. Beatrice said nothing, waiting. I want to make it right, Edward continued. Take responsibility for my child, for you. He glanced around the cabin again. You don't belong out here in the wilderness. Come back to Philadelphia with me. I've secured a position at a prestigious academy. We could be married, raise our son properly in civilization. The absurdity of his proposal left Beatrice momentarily speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was steady and clear. No, Edward, I don't want to marry you. I never want to see you again after today. Edward's face hardened. Be reasonable, Beatrice. Think of the boy. What kind of life can you give him here? A loving one, came a deep voice from the doorway. They turned to see Wade standing there, his expression thunderous. He must have returned while they were talking. Edward straightened, looking Wade up and down with barely disguised disdain. And you are Wade Keller, he replied, crossing to stand beside Beatrice and William. Beatrice's husband and William's father. Edward's eyebrows rose. Father, I think not, sir. I'm the boy's father. A father is more than blood, Wade said evenly. A father is there for midnight feedings and first steps. A father teaches, protects, loves. His blue eyes bored into Edward's. Where were you when William was born 2 months early? Where were you when he had croup so bad last winter we thought we might lose him? Edward faltered but quickly recovered. I made a mistake. I'm here to correct it. You're too late, Beatrice said firmly. Wade is right. A father is more than blood. William is his son in every way that matters. Edward's expression darkened. I have rights, legal rights. You abandoned those rights when you abandoned us, Beatrice countered. But if you want a legal battle, we're prepared for it. This was a bluff. They had no idea how a court might rule, but Edward didn't need to know that. Wade placed a protective arm around Beatrice and William. I think you should leave now, Mr. Harrington. You've had your say. For a tense moment, it seemed Edward might argue further. Then, with a tight nod, he retrieved his hat. This isn't over. I'll be staying in town for a few days. Think about my offer, Beatrice. Think about what's best for the boy. After he left, Beatrice's composure crumbled. Wade held her and William as she cried, tears of anger and relief mingling. He can't take him, can he? She asked fearfully. He can't take our son. Wade's expression was grim. I don't know, but I'll die before I let that happen. They spent a sleepless night discussing options. By morning, they had a plan. They rode into town, William securely bundled between them, and went directly to the law office of Benjamin Foster, a former judge who had settled in Broken Springs for his health. Foster listened to their story with grave attention, asking pointed questions about Edward's abandonment and Wade's subsequent relationship with William. It's a complicated situation, he admitted when they finished. Legally, the biological father has rights, especially if he's willing to marry the mother. But courts are increasingly considering the welfare of the child above all else. William barely knows Edward, Beatrice emphasized. He'd be traumatized to be taken from the only home, the only father he's ever known. Foster nodded thoughtfully. There's also the matter of abandonment. Mr. Harrington made no attempt to contact you during your pregnancy. Provided no support, none, Beatrice confirmed. And he made no inquiries about the child after birth. No offers of financial assistance, nothing until now. Foster tapped his fingers on his desk. That works in your favor, as does the fact of your marriage and stable home. He looked at Wade. You formally accepted the child as your own. Introduced him as your son. From the beginning, Wade affirmed. Good, very good. Foster made some notes. Here's what I suggest. I'll draw up formal adoption papers for Mr. Keller to legally adopt William. If Mr. Harrington wants to contest them, he'll have to do so in court. Given his abandonment and the fact that William is thriving in your care, I believe a judge would rule in your favor. Hope blossomed in Beatrice's chest. You really think so? Foster smiled reassuringly. I do, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. He leaned forward. Would you like me to speak with Mr. Harrington? Explain the legal realities he faces? Wade and Beatrice exchanged glances, then nodded. Please, Wade said. As they left Foster's office, they nearly collided with Henry Blackburn on the boardwalk. Keller, Mrs. Keller, he greeted them with forced politeness. What brings you to town? Before they could answer, Edward emerged from the hotel across the street and approached. Beatrice, he called. I'd like to continue our conversation from yesterday. Blackburn's eyes darted between them with sudden interest. An acquaintance of yours. An unwelcome one, Wade replied curtly. Beatrice clutched William closer as Edward joined them. A moment of awkward silence followed. Henry Blackburn, the banker finally introduced himself, extending a hand to Edward. I own the bank here in Broken Springs. Edward Harrington, Edward replied, shaking the offered hand. From Philadelphia. Something in Blackburn's expression changed. A calculating look entered his eyes. Philadelphia. What brings you all the way to our little town? Edward glanced at Beatrice and William. Family matters. Understanding dawned on Blackburn's face. I see. Perhaps we could discuss these matters over lunch. I'd be most interested in hearing about Philadelphia. Been considering some Eastern investments myself. Wade stepped forward. Mr. Foster will be contacting you, Harrington. I suggest you listen to what he has to say before you make any decisions." With that, he guided Beatrice and William toward their wagon, leaving Edward looking after them with a mixture of frustration and determination. "I don't like this," Wade muttered as he helped Beatrice into the wagon. "Blackburn and Harrington together. What could Blackburn gain from this?" Beatrice wondered. Wade's expression was grim. "Leverage. He still wants our land, and he's not above using William to get it." For 2 days they waited anxiously for news from town. Wade refused to leave the ranch, standing guard over his family. On the 3rd day, Sarah McDaniel rode up with news. "Thought you should know," she said as they sat at the kitchen table. "Harrington's been meeting with Blackburn. They've been seen together at the hotel, deep in conversation." Wade's jaw tightened. "Any idea what about?" Sarah hesitated. "There's talk that Harrington's considering filing for custody of William, and," she added reluctantly, "that he's offered Blackburn a partnership in some Eastern venture if Blackburn helps him." Beatrice felt sick. "Edward doesn't care about William. This is about his pride, his ego. And Blackburn's just using him," Wade added bitterly. That evening, Benjamin Foster arrived at the ranch. His expression was grave but determined. "I've spoken with Mr. Harrington," he reported. "Made the legal situation clear to him. He seems unwilling to accept that his case is weak." "He's working with Blackburn now," Wade informed him. Foster nodded. "So I gathered. Blackburn has considerable influence in this county, including with Judge Wilson, who would hear any custody petition." Beatrice felt despair washing over her. "So Edward could win. He could take William." "Not necessarily," Foster assured her, "but it would be a difficult fight." He hesitated. "There is another option, one that would eliminate the legal question entirely." "What?" Wade asked. Foster looked directly at Wade. "If William's biological father were to formally relinquish his rights and consent to your adoption of the child, the matter would be settled permanently." Hope flickered in Beatrice's heart. "But why would Edward agree to that?" "That," Foster said, "is what we need to determine. What does Mr. Harrington truly want? Because I don't believe it's actually the child." The next morning, Beatrice made a difficult decision. "I need to speak with Edward alone," she told Wade. "Find out what he really wants." Wade objected strenuously, but Beatrice was adamant. "He won't be honest if you're there, and he won't harm me, not if he wants any chance with William." Reluctantly, Wade agreed, but insisted on accompanying her to town and waiting nearby. They left William with Sarah, not wanting to risk Edward attempting to take him. At the hotel, Beatrice found Edward taking a late breakfast in the dining room. He seemed surprised but pleased to see her. "Beatrice, have you reconsidered my offer?" She sat across from him, her expression resolute. "No, I'm here to understand why you're really doing this. After more than a year of silence, why do you suddenly want to be a father?" Edward shifted uncomfortably. "I told you. I regret my actions. I want to make amends." Beatrice studied his face, seeing past the smooth exterior to the calculation beneath. "No, there's something else." "Tell me the truth, Edward, or I'll walk out that door and fight you with everything I have." For a moment his facade cracked, revealing frustration and something like desperation. "Fine. You want the truth. I'm in trouble, Beatrice, financial trouble." This she hadn't expected. "What kind of trouble?" Edward sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Investments gone wrong, debts I can't pay. My position at the academy is at risk." He leaned forward. "But my father has offered a solution. He'll settle my debts and secure my future if I marry and provide him with a legitimate grandson." Understanding dawned. "So that's it. You need William to secure your inheritance." "It's not just that," Edward protested, though his eyes betrayed him. "I do regret how I treated you. We could make it work, Beatrice. For William's sake." Disgust rose in Beatrice's throat. "You haven't even asked his name until now. You don't care about him, only what he represents to your father. Edward's expression hardened. Be that as it may, I am his father. The law is on my side. Not as firmly as you think, Beatrice countered. Mr. Foster explained your legal position. It's not as strong as you believe, especially given your abandonment. Blackburn says otherwise, Edward replied smugly. He has influence with the local judge. Beatrice leaned forward. Edward, listen to me. William is happy, he's loved. He has a father who adores him, who has been there since the beginning. Would you really take him from that, to satisfy your father's demands? For a brief moment, doubt flickered in Edward's eyes. Then his face closed again. I'll do what I must. Beatrice changed tactics. What if there was another way? One that satisfied your father without tearing apart my family? Edward raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Your father wants a grandson. What if you told him you had provided one, but the mother refused to marry you and is raising him in the West? You could send occasional reports, perhaps even a photograph. She took a deep breath. In return, you formally relinquish any claim to William and consent to Wade's legal adoption. Edward considered this, clearly intrigued. My father would want proof, regular proof that his grandson exists. You could visit, once a year perhaps, a brief, supervised visit. The words cost Beatrice dearly, but she would agree to almost anything to secure William's future. And how would that help my financial situation? Edward pressed. Beatrice had anticipated this question. I still have some money from my parents' estate. Not a fortune, but enough to help you clear your most pressing debts. Consider it payment for your cooperation. Edward sat back, calculating. It might work, but Blackburn has his own agenda, Beatrice interrupted. He's using you to get to us because he wants our land. He doesn't care about you or William. Edward was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. I'll need to think about this and discuss the financial details. Beatrice stood. Do that. But remember, Edward, this offer is the best you'll get from us. If you pursue a custody battle, we will fight with everything we have. And I promise you, the respectable facade you've built will not survive what I will reveal about your character in open court. She left him then, his expression a mixture of anger and grudging respect. Outside, Wade was waiting anxiously. What happened? Beatrice explained her proposal as they walked toward Foster's office. Wade stopped mid-stride when she mentioned offering Edward money. You'd pay him off. Give him your savings. If it secures William's future, yes, Beatrice said firmly. It's just money, Wade. Wade shook his head in wonder. You continue to amaze me, Beatrice Keller. They found Foster in his office and explained the potential agreement. The lawyer nodded approvingly. A pragmatic solution. I'll draw up the necessary papers immediately. For 3 days, they waited for Edward's answer. Finally, he requested a meeting at Foster's office. Wade and Beatrice arrived to find Edward and Foster already seated, a stack of documents on the desk between them. Mrs. Keller, Mr. Keller, Foster greeted them. Mr. Harrington has considered your proposal and is prepared to accept, with a few modifications. Edward nodded stiffly. I'll relinquish my rights to the boy and consent to the adoption. In return, I'll receive the financial compensation we discussed, plus an agreement allowing 1 visit per year, not to exceed 3 days. And, Foster added, Mr. Harrington has requested a formal letter from Mrs. Keller documenting the child's birth and confirming his paternity for his father's records. Beatrice glanced at Wade, who nodded slightly. That's acceptable, she agreed. They spent the next hour reviewing and signing documents. When the last signature was in place, Foster stamped and witnessed the papers. It's done, he announced. Mr. Keller is now, legally and irrevocably, William's father. Relief washed over Beatrice. She reached for Wade's hand, finding it already extended toward hers. Edward stood, his expression unreadable. "I'll collect the bank draft on my way out of town. My train leaves this afternoon." "One moment," Wade said, rising as well. He fixed Edward with a steady gaze. "Thank you for doing the right thing for William." Edward hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Take care of him." "With my life," Wade promised. After Edward left, Beatrice let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Is it really over?" Foster smiled, handing them the adoption decree. "Yes, Mrs. Keller. William is officially, legally, and permanently your husband's son." They collected William from Sarah's farm on their way home, both of them holding him a little tighter than usual. That night, after putting him to bed, they sat on the porch steps as they had so many evenings before. "I can hardly believe it's really over," Beatrice said, leaning against Wade's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. "It is. No one can take him from us now." Beatrice sighed contentedly. "Do you know what today is?" Wade thought for a moment. "October 18th. "Yes, but it's also exactly 1 year since I showed up on your doorstep in that storm." She turned to face him. "1 year since you gave us shelter." Wade smiled, pressing his forehead against hers. "Best decision I ever made." "Mine too," Beatrice whispered. "Thank you for taking us in. For giving us a home, a family." "Thank you for staying," Wade replied simply, "for making this cabin a home again." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one above the pines. "What do we do about Blackburn?" Beatrice finally asked. "He'll be angry that his plan failed." Wade shrugged. "Blackburn's always been a problem. We'll deal with him the same way we always have, by standing our ground." Beatrice nodded thoughtfully. "We should invite Sarah and the children for dinner tomorrow, celebrate William's adoption." "Good idea," Wade agreed. "And maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe what?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Maybe we could also celebrate the fact that William's going to be a big brother." Beatrice stared at him in shock. "How did you know?" "I was going to tell you tonight," Wade laughed, pulling her close. "You've been sick every morning for a week, wife. I can count." Joy bubbled up inside her. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Wade assured her, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our family is growing just as it should." 6 months later, Rose Keller was born on time and with considerably less drama than her brother's arrival. William, now nearly 2, was fascinated by his tiny sister, constantly wanting to touch her red hair and count her fingers and toes. The following spring brought unexpected news. Henry Blackburn, overextended in various business ventures, was forced to sell several properties to cover his debts, including the Taylor land adjacent to the Keller ranch. Wade purchased it for a fair price, finally able to begin the expansion he had dreamed of. Beatrice continued teaching at the Broken Spring School, bringing William and Rose with her most days. The children of the town adored teachers' babies, and older students often helped watch them during lessons. Sarah McDaniel's farm thrived, her children grew, and she eventually found happiness with a kind widower who moved to the area from Kansas. Emma McDaniel remained Beatrice's devoted helper with the younger children at school, showing a natural talent for teaching that Beatrice quietly nurtured. Edward Harrington returned once the following year, as agreed. His visit was brief and formal, his manner distant. William, not yet 3, regarded this strange man with polite curiosity but no recognition. Edward did not visit again the next year, instead sending a letter relinquishing his visitation rights permanently. He had married, he wrote, and his new wife was expecting. His father was satisfied with the prospect of a grandchild closer to home. "Are you sad about it?" Wade asked when Beatrice showed him the letter. She considered the question carefully. "No," she decided. "It's better this way, cleaner." She looked out the window to where William was helping Wade build a small corral for his first pony. William has the father he deserves. As the years passed, the Keller ranch grew and prospered. Wade's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout Colorado and beyond. Beatrice eventually became the headmistress of the expanding Broken Springs school. William grew into a thoughtful, responsible young man with his mother's intelligence and his father's quiet strength. Rose, fiery and independent, was the spitting image of Wade, though she had Beatrice's love of books and learning. 2 more children joined their family twins, James and Thomas, born when William was 10 and Rose 8. The cabin, long since expanded into a proper ranch house, rang with laughter, arguments, music, and all the beautiful chaos of family life. On stormy nights, Wade would sometimes tell the children the story of how their mother had appeared at his door during the worst storm of the spring of 1873, soaked, exhausted, and carrying William in her belly. "Your mother was the bravest person I'd ever seen," he would say, his blue eyes finding Beatrice's across the room. "Still is." And Beatrice, watching her husband and their 4 children gathered around the fire in the home they had built together, would think of that desperate young woman who had sought shelter from the rain and found so much more: a home, a family, a love that had weathered every storm. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wade took Beatrice back to the spot where his original cabin had stood, before they had expanded and eventually built their larger home nearby. The old foundation was still visible, a reminder of where their journey together had begun. "Hard to believe it's been 20 years, Wade said, his hair now streaked with gray but his blue eyes as bright as ever. "The best 20 years, Beatrice agreed, leaning into his embrace. Wade pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden box, beautifully carved. "Made this for you." Beatrice opened it to find a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny painting of their original cabin on one side and their family on the other: Wade, Beatrice, and all 4 children. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Wade fastened it around her neck, his hand still strong and sure despite the years of hard work. "Thought you should have something to remember where we started, when you showed up at my door in that storm." Beatrice smiled up at the man who had sheltered her when she needed it most, who had given her son a father and her heart a home. "I'll never forget," she promised, "but I'm even more grateful for where we are now, and for all the years to come." Wade kissed her then, a kiss as full of promise as their first had been all those years ago. Around them, the Colorado wind whispered through the pines, telling the story of a pregnant woman who had sought shelter from the rain and found a cowboy who had given her shelter for life.